Hello, and welcome to Still Standing. I'm Shannon, I'm your host, and this is the podcast where I interview inspirational people who are going through, who have gone through very difficult and challenging circumstances, and who are finding their way through or have found their way through. And hopefully, you will find some inspiration in in Jenna's story. Jenna's here with me today. Her name is Jenna Bryson. And Jenna is an old friend of mine, and she is a very talented actor, comic, musician. And we are here today because Jenna has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I'll have her explain all the ins and outs of that. And here to share her story, the difficulties, the triumphs, the feelings, all of it is Jenna Bryson. So, Jenna, thank you so much for joining me today to share your story so vulnerably and also with such a beautiful sense of humor. We've been talking some, and I really appreciate that. True to your nature, you are keeping a sense of humor despite the obstacles. So thank you again for being here with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah. Um, it hasn't always been so humor filled, this journey. But I will say I guess my creative brain like immediately after the diagnosis, like I automatically started like downloading or receiving like artistic ideas, like, oh, you got to write this, here's a song idea, here's a funny like sketch idea. Like you know, and weirdly, I'll start this story with the fact that, I ignored a lot of signs for a very long time. I normalized them. I shouldn't say I ignored them because I was very much conscious of them, but I normalized these signs or symptoms. And so I will say that it was probably around the end of 2020, I noticed a big change in my menstrual flow. So, just to let your audience know, I was diagnosed with stage 4 endometrial cancer, also called uterine cancer. And I was diagnosed that originally in December of 2023, but without the staging. They knew that I had had a first surgery, which was an emergent surgery, um, where I presented to the hospital with I had not been able to walk, and I stopped eating for like a whole week. So I hadn't walked in a week, and I had stopped eating because the pain was so bad in my abdomen. And so I ended up having an emergent surgery to remove what they found were two giant, they thought they were cysts at the time, but they turned out to be tumors, solid tumors, that one on each of my ovaries. One was the size of a grapefruit and the other was the size of a cantaloupe. And if you're wondering, how does somebody walk around with two things of that size in their abdomen and not know it? Well, it absolutely happens because they grow so slowly. I was told this type of cancer grows so incredibly slowly, which is, knock on wood, a good thing. um, but also because they grow so slowly, it's not abnormal for people with a uterus and ovaries to normalize these things, right? So if you're having a period, you may normalize these things as just part of like your life. So I had done that. But it was the end of 2020 that I actually really noticed symptoms compounding. I had longer, heavier period flows, and I just wrote them off with like, oh, I'm over 40 now. I'm aging. It's perimenopause, right? We don't talk about that a lot. So I just assumed. And because it was 2020, I've kind of always been medically avoidant. I think it runs in my family. But I definitely was avoidant of any hospitals or doctors during the year 2020, if anyone can guess why. Nobody wanted to get this disease that was killing a million people around the world, if not more. So I was just like, oh, it's perimenopause. Oh well, I have to wear heavier, bigger tampons now or what have you. And I continued life that way until, for the next few years until the symptoms got really bad. And like I said, I could not walk. I stopped eating. Um, this is a lot of like downstairs action we're talking about. So these things also involve like you're going to the bathroom habits, and that I had normalized, like, oh, I just have irregular BMs or whatever. No, all of that was going on down there was because there were tumors growing and I had no idea. And I I've never been pregnant that I know of, and so I've never been to an obstetrician gynecologist for pregnancy checkups, and that is normally where they find these things because there's no way to find them except with a transvaginal ultrasound and then concurrently with like a CT scan or MRI. So because I would go for my annual pap smears. I did that up until like I started to get really busy in my late 30s. So I think the last time I had a pap smear was probably 35. So that's like, well, actually, the last time I had one was summer of 2023, and they still didn't find because that was like right at the height, right? So I'd actually had a pap smear and a pelvic exam summer of 2023, and they didn't find it. And despite me actually explaining my symptoms and what I was going through, and I was crying in that doctor's office, they did not find anything, and they did not order that next step, which would have been a scan. Um, so that's a really important thing that I want to share about my story for women and, people with a uterus. How I don't care how you identify. If you have a uterus and you have ovaries, pay attention to those changes. Do not normalize them, especially if you're somebody who's child free or deciding you're not going to have kids. They are not looking at you downstairs the way that they would with a person who's trying to become pregnant, right? Or is pregnant. So they don't find these things. And that's why one of the big risks of for this particular disease is never having been pregnant or never having had children. And it's strictly for the fact that they're not looking. Nobody's looking down there. So you've got to get a transvaginal ultrasound. You've got to push for it if you have those signs, if anything has changed, especially if you're child free, especially if you're, also aging and you're over the age of 40. So that's kind of, what happened in a nutshell. This is such a long tangent, but going back to what I was going to say about 2020, I believe that my body, my brain, my spirit, my soul, something has known this entire time that I have had this cancer in my body. I think something has known. I think because of how slowly it grows, I truly believe it started growing more than 10 years ago. Because that is when I started noticing weight changes and changes in like the size of my body, despite I'm not changing how much I eat. Again, I normalized it. Oh, I'm aging. I'm over 35 now. Everybody says you're going to gain weight over 35. I normalized that. Um, but that actually, as soon as I had the first surgery and then I had a second surgery in April to take out the rest of my reproductive organs and cancer that had grown into my bowel, which is why it was affecting my, bathroom habits. I immediately lost a ton of weight. Like I immediately was down to a weight that I had not seen since my early 30s. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm back. Like that's wild. And it was entirely because cancer was growing in my body this entire time. And something in me knew that. And in 2020, a friend of mine, she's my comedy partner. Her name is Josie K. She's a wonderful human being. I'm so blessed to have her in my life. We were just pitching comedy ideas to each other. And, I had joked about the changes going on in my body and was like, what if it's cancer? Oh, it could be cancer. And I like spit out this little improvised song to her, like, so you're in the hospital, you're not feeling too well. You got to have a little procedure to get the cancer cells. And she laughed her face off. And I laughed and I was like, okay, we have to do this. We have to rent a little hospital room set and like, record this sketch. And we did that at the end of 2020. And albeit the rhymes in that comedy song, that sketch, were aimed towards breast cancer, since that's like the most common that affects like people born female, right? And even men. People born men can have breast cancer. So it was kind of aimed at that. But looking back, when we finally released that sketch in October of 2023. This was a few weeks before I had my emergent procedure. Um, we've released this video, and I went into the hospital and was like, wouldn't this be just hilarious if what I have had been predicted by my body, by my mind, my psyche this entire time? And sure enough, it was like this sketch was screaming at me. It was like, you have to go to the doctors. You have to figure out what's wrong with your body because I'm trying to tell you something. And there were many other signs that we'll talk about as well, but that was the big one that was like, wow, I've never written a premonition sketch before, but there it is.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenna, for all of that, because it is really important that we are aware, especially uterine cancer is one of the most difficult to detect because we don't start notice it, we women or people again
Mhm.
who have a uterus, that we don't, first of all, weird stuff happens to women and people born with uteruses all the time. So it isn't that unusual. Yes, we're having our period, we're ovulating, and our weight might fluctuate. And as we get older, things start to change. But also with uterine cancer, people don't start to notice symptoms until it's pretty far because until it has progressed. So it is really important. And I appreciate you sharing that in the hopes that it will resonate with someone who says, you know what? I should get that checked out. Do they actually?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
That everything in me is I'm called to I what I tell people now is if I can save one person from being a stage 4 uterine cancer, that's why I'm telling my story because yes, it because I feel like the universe, my soul, my spirit was something was telling me. I feel like I had a 5-year window to take care of this. And I pushed it all the way to the end of the 5-year window. Like where if I had maybe looked at this a few years earlier, maybe it would have been stage 2 or stage 3, maybe stage 1, I don't know, but yeah, it's really important to not normalize those changes. Anything that's changed, if it's been more than 2 weeks, that another friend of mine who has a cancer diagnosis says she has a 2-week rule. If something has gone on for 2 weeks, see your doctor. See a doctor. I know a lot of us don't have a doctor, but go see someone. I don't care if it's Planned Parenthood, anything. You've got to go because it's not normal.
Yeah. And my question was going to be, from what I understand, they don't do preventative screenings for this. Isn't that right?
That's right.
And that's
That-
tough because we might say, can you check me for that? I don't have any symptoms, but I just want to see if there's anything in there. Will they
right.
do that if you request it?
I think the problem is, from what I've heard, is that it's insurance and it's an
Yeah.
expense, right?
Yeah.
So it took me having to tell the hospital, hey, I'm not walking and I have not eaten in a week because of this pain, this severe pain. I mean, this pain that I had, I was in the bathroom just trying to go number 2, TMI, but
Yeah.
that's what
That's a
we're talking about
symptom.
here. And it was the worst pain I've ever experienced in my entire life. I was literally screaming for 10 minutes and was like, that's not normal. That I am not going to normalize, and I've got to see somebody about this. But yeah, it's because scans are expensive. So all of this comes down to the insurance company and stuff. So you've got to present and you've got to really insist on that this pain is so bad. I cannot take it anymore. Um, you have to, like, the advocating of yourself is next level. Like I was sincere in my tears and my crying about this in the hospital. And it took the doctors, and I have an insurance plan out here in California. We're very lucky to in California, they expanded Medi-Cal in ironically just before the pandemic, which is why I said I felt like I had a 5-year like thing to kind of take care of this because that's when California started that. Um, so I'm very lucky to be on that program. But even then, they're because of like, oh, the plan that you chose or whatever doesn't cover this hospital. So they were fighting on they didn't want to authorize the tests or whatever. So the hospitalists, the doctors there even had to stress to, you know, the Medi-Cal program that I'm on, hey, she's not walking, she's not eating. We have to do this scan. And finally they were like, okay. And then they had to push for the surgery too. They were like, "Oh, your plan is saying that you need to go to a different hospital, have this done." And I was like, "I have not eaten in a week. I am refusing to walk because the pain is that bad." So they had to push again, and finally they were like, "Okay, we'll give you the emergent surgery, but you're going to have to do follow-ups somewhere else." So it's one of those things that just it's expensive, and yes, they don't want to do them because of that. So you have to push for it, and that's really the bottom line of it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it's good to know. So okay, so now you've just been diagnosed. How are you feeling
Yeah.
emotionally?
Oh, devastated. I felt emotionally devastated, of course, hearing the diagnosis because I had to actually get a second surgery to stage. So, I was told by the first doctor who did my emergent surgery, he was very upbeat and he thought that I would be stage 1. So I was very hopeful that I would be diagnosed stage 1, but he said, "You've got to have a second surgery to now take out the uterus, to explore what else is going on in your abdomen." And by the time I got my healthcare plan switched to a different hospital that was going to be more like inclusive, where they weren't going to have to get anything authorized. So, for people who are in California, that was basically the Department of Health Services to just go on the county health plan, basically, so that they could do anything and everything that was needed. And my goodness, was that a gift, to be honest. Like you would think like, oh, county health, that's not that great. Actually, it's been really great. They've really taken care of me and they don't have to check for anything. They can order whatever tests and things that they need. So, but it took, a couple months to switch paths and get on that. And so I was told this surgery is going to be open abdominal, and that in itself was terrifying. They were like, we're going to, cut you from navel to, hoo ha, basically, from like my ribs to the bottom of my pelvis. Um, and so that was terrifying. But they said that's what we have to do to stage you because we've got to look around. And now looking back at that, that's another gift, to be honest, because when they went in, they found that there was a little tiny piece of cancer starting to grow on the right side of my diaphragm. And I think if they hadn't have done another open abdominal surgery, um, because my emergent surgery was actually what's called laparoscopic. So that's minimally invasive. It's like a few holes across your abdomen. They stick cameras inside. So that surgery did not find this new growth. So I now look at it as like this was torturous to experience, this open abdominal procedure. It was 12 hours long. Um, but at the end of the day, they found that the little piece that was on my diaphragm was malignant. And so it was very small. It was 5 millimeters. But they took it out with excellent margins. What that means, excellent or good margins, means that the margins of what they cut out had no cancer. So that's a good sign that, oh, the rest of your diaphragm is healthy then. Um, they were able to check some other things like a cyst on my liver and a cyst on my spleen. They checked both of those. They were benign. They were nothing. But then they found that my, uterus was growing into my bowel because of the cancer. So they had to actually cut and resect part of my colon. And that was all very scary because these were things that I was told going into the surgery, this could happen, this might happen, whatever, and you just don't expect that. Oh, that's not going to be me though. I'm going to be the straight A student, right? And I'm going to come out with like flying colors. So, I was actually, told in my surgery recovery of what they found and that, the words later stage were used, and that was devastating to hear. And then it was like another month out of the hospital or when I found out what the actual staging was. And that was really hard, because yeah, nobody wants to hear that number. That's even people who don't have cancer or and maybe even don't have people with cancer in their lives who are so lucky. Um even they know that the number 4 in reference to cancer is not a good number. It's not what you want to hear. You want to hear stage 1. Um but, as devastating as that was, it was also good to hear the doctor say that a reminder that all stage 4s are lumped together. So even if you're like just over the hill of stage 4, which is what mine is because of that piece on my diaphragm, um, that you're lumped into the whole group of stage 4 of people who have it all over their body. So that's very different. And so as hard as that was to hear, I had to immediately think, the good news is that not in my bones, it's not in my lungs, it's not in my breast, it's not all over my body, right? I had to just remember at least it was confined to my abdomen, and even then just a little tiny pit on my diaphragm, which I think probably because those first 2 tumors that were removed, this is me guessing. I'm not a doctor obviously, but my guess is because those things were so huge and they had expanded my ribs. Like Shannon, when I tell you I immediately dropped 2 sizes of clothing after these procedures, it's because these things were pushing up into my ribs and like pushing things out. And so my guess is that one of those tumors came up close and was probably touching my diaphragm. And that's probably how the cancer went from that tumor to there. That's my guess. It just seems logical, right? As big as these things were. Um, so yeah, very devastating to hear that news, but always important to remember that you're an individual. Everybody's bodies are individual and unique. And just because you hear a stage 4 diagnosis, um, it's not necessarily a death sentence. And quite, often these days, it's not because there are a lot of new cancer treatments that are out there and that are doing great things for people. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it must be completely overwhelming and surreal
Yes, it's
because
surreal.
it happens to people
Yeah,
and you know that it could happen to you logically, but
right,
we're not going to waste time worrying about that
right.
because we could worry all day long about anything that could happen to us. But when it does happen to you, it must be so shocking. And
It's shocking.
yeah,
1 in 3 people I learned after that, 1 in 3 people now will be diagnosed with cancer. 1 in 3.
that's a lot of people.
That's a lot. And so we all wanna think, "Oh, it's not gonna happen to me, it can't happen to me," like, like, you know,
Yeah.
twist it away, but with all of the toxins in our environment and, we're discovering they still don't know how mine was caused, by the way. There are things that I'm looking into and that the doctors are looking into, but there's no clear reason right now of why that would have happened,
Right.
in particularly. But that's kind of like a lot of cancers. There are so many toxins in our environment. There's things we're putting in our bodies that we just found out recently, that every major tampon brand, including organic
Mhm.
tampons, have lead in them, lead and arsenic. Lead is a known carcinogen.
Yeah. I heard that too.
S-
Yeah.
that's insane to me. And I'm like, okay, when are the class actions coming from that? Because I also learned that endometrial cancer has doubled in the last 20 years. Doubled.
Wow.
It is
Yeah.
now the 6th most common cancer that people born female can experience. The 6th
Yeah.
most common. So, and it's on the rise, unfortunately.
Now you have I mean, everyone has people that love them, and family and things like that. You have a very supportive partner. You have very supportive friends. And I'm assuming very supportive family. It sounds like from what I know of you, but I would love to hear what you have to say about that because going through something like this, you need that support so much. So I'd love to hear about how your friends have rallied around you. One thing is that one of your best friends started a GoFundMe, and I'll actually have the link below because
Oh, that's so kind.
guys, yeah, guys, it's the the costs of treatment are astounding. And the lack of support even from non from sorry, health insurance and
Yeah.
other organizations. I mean, they only allow for so much, and this will absolutely destroy any person, just with the amount of bills
Yeah.
that we have, and especially Jenna, myself being freelancers, being artists,
Mm.
we don't have any kind of protection as an actor necessarily unless you have Screen Actors Guild. So I just wanted to mention that there will be a GoFundMe if you'd like to donate, even just like $2 if that's all you got. It just really helps. So thank you. But yeah, I'd love to talk about the how you're sort of getting through
Yeah.
with support and whatever else is really helping you during these times.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. If you've got a cancer diagnosis, especially one that's advanced, which means that now you need adjuvant care, adjuvant treatment. It's it's ironic. Like I know Princess Kate has not come out and said what type of cancer she was diagnosed with, but the timeline lining up with my diagnosis and the fact that she had this big abdominal surgery and so did I have a strong feeling that hers may be a reproductive cancer as well. Um, but yeah, but I don't have queen princess money.
Yeah.
I was a princess in a former life, entertaining children for 20 plus years as a fairy tale princess. So yeah, definitely the support system is really needed. And I just feel so sad for anybody who has to go through this without somebody by their side or without a support system. I'm very lucky to have my partner. And he's just the greatest. And he's been with me to most of my chemotherapy appointments. That's one of the things that is really, really helpful is to have chemotherapy is very hard. It's another friend of mine. It's so funny. It's not funny, not funny, haha, but it's funny, interesting about how many people in my comedy community and music community I know who have been diagnosed with a cancer recently, and most of us are around the same age, or some of these people are even younger than me. And one of those friends, they have a stage 4 breast cancer diagnosis that they've been living with for 2 years. And what they said to me was, it's hard, but it's doable. Chemotherapy is hard, but it's doable. And now I understand what they mean because, you're getting a big old needle in your arm. And for me, that's really traumatic every time because I had so much trauma in the hospital with needles and them not being able to find veins. And I had a night where my hand and arm was blown up like the size like of a huge water balloon. So I've got trauma around IV now. Um, but once that's in, it is quite doable. You sit there, you have your partner there. Hopefully, you have somebody there to check in on you, to keep you comfortable, to, change your blanket or whatever thing you need, get you more water, whatever. That is so helpful, and just the moral support in general is really helpful because then you don't feel like you're going through it alone. I say that like, no one can go through this treatment but the person who needs the treatment, right? So technically you are alone, but then you're also not alone because you have these people around you to give you love and, just a hug is so helpful. Just a check-in. My friend Josie, who you mentioned, she did start the GoFundMe. Um, and we started that. That was a really difficult decision to make, but it was turned out to be the right one, the right instinct, because my instinct told me from the jump, like, I I cannot be trying to find work or trying or working during this. I just for me, knowing how depressed I was before this, which I think was another sign, by the way, of what was going on in my body was the deep depression and anxiety I was experiencing. I feel that that was another message. But just knowing how hard the last few years had been for me, and I was already underemployed since the pandemic. I mean, so many people have been. I feel like it has been either feast or famine for people since the pandemic. You either did really well because you bought GameStop or something, I don't know, or because, you're a capitalist billionaire, or you've not done well because you're a freelancer and the whole world has changed. Um, so I just knew I want to try to do a GoFundMe, whatever I can raise. I feel like I'm gonna need this to last me through the end of the year, just kind of knowing how things slow down towards the end of the year anyway, and just like knowing that chemotherapy treatments compound, or they accumulate. So what that means is actually the first couple were not that hard, but as you keep going, it takes like longer to recover. You have less white blood cells, which means it's harder for your immune system to fight off illnesses. I basically feel like I have a small cold. I have a little tissue in my hand now because after every infusion, it's like I have a small cold for a few days, for like basically a week. And so I had said, Josie, this is going to be really hard, but I think I need to do a GoFundMe so that I can just focus on healing. And if I can't cook, I can still order something healthy to be delivered, or, I can still have air conditioning in my house, because I can't be suffering without air conditioning. So there's just a lot of like those things that you just take for granted every day that need to be taken care of. So we did that, and that was like my coming out party of, hey everyone, I have a cancer diagnosis, was launching that GoFundMe, and it turned out to be a really positive thing to do. There's always going to be people, I'm sure, who quietly disagree with that. And that's fine. I don't know who those people are. Thankfully, they've not made themselves known. But in general, the outpouring of support that came from that was so worth it. And of course, now I can focus, and I can focus on making my therapy appointments, which I didn't have before this diagnosis. And I have found to be very helpful because I'm now with a therapist who she provides therapy for people like me all the time. Like that's her job. So that was really crucial to do. Um, I haven't even made the whole goal, but that's okay because I feel like, even still right now, it's enough. Like it's enough that I don't have to think about it. I can concentrate on treatment, and I can concentrate on figuring out what's going to be after this. After finishing treatment, there is hopefully a clinical trial. It's a double blind study, so that makes it very hard. That means I could be on a placebo and I won't know, nor will my doctors know. But I can concentrate on that afterwards and be like, okay, they're like, we might have to change your insurance again. Okay, but we can, because I have that time and space now where I can do that, where I can take the time to go where I need to go to be part of a study if that's going to help keep this cancer away, because that's my goal and that's what I'm focused on, is no evidence of disease. So the outpouring of support through the GoFundMe and through, even just friends on Facebook and Instagram, people that I've never met but have been fans of my music over the years. That's, like you said, that's where I started, was my journey as a singer-songwriter, and people who have stuck by me all the years as a fan through my music, reaching out, and just some people just saying like, "Hey, I have a funny story to share with you today." Like that's so helpful. Just to be remembered that you're an alive human being is so helpful in these times, because I will say on the flip side, there are people that I'm very shocked have not reached out at all. People that I thought I was closer to. And I'm like, wow, people that I've even like, they may have posted something like, hey, is anyone interested in a yada, yada, yada? And I'll reach out and say, yeah, I'm interested because actually, with this cancer diagnosis, I need XYZ now because of whatever. I'm leaving out specifics so that I don't like, check this person. But that person has still not responded. And I'm like, wow, I really thought we were friends. And so that is actually a huge reminder that, I was told by somebody, by my therapist actually, that there are people who will disappear from your life because of a cancer diagnosis. And oh, wow, is that interesting? Me as an empath, I would never expect anyone to behave like that, to not even respond like with oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm just hearing about this. I don't care, lie to me that
Yeah.
you but like, so, and there's other people who just I haven't reached out to personally because I don't have time. I've made all these posts and announcements and things that, there's people that probably just don't even know. So I would say if you're comfortable, be vocal about it. Because again, you do need the support going through this. Some people, yes, will disappear. Some people will feel uncomfortable with this, but you will find out the ones who really matter to you and the ones who you really should focus on when you have a diagnosis like this.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was going to ask you something along those lines, which is that a lot of people don't know how to deal with these things, death, illness, loss, grief, all these things. And it's because they think, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Well,
Mhm.
I know that my sister had something happen to her, and she said, you know what? My best friend said all the wrong things, but at least she said something because there were people that just avoided it. And I think they think, oh, I don't want to, some people think, oh, I don't want to bother you, or I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to remind you, as if you're not as if you don't already know that you have cancer, or you don't
Yeah.
already know that you lost your child, or whatever it is. And sometimes it's better to just fumble through and say the wrong thing and try than to say nothing. And not everybody it's confronting. If you have this, then maybe that means they could have this. But I do think it's like, I don't even know what to say. And so they just don't say anything. And that's more isolating and alienating than anything.
Yes, it
And
is.
even just saying, I really don't know what to say, but I just want you to know that I see you. I really don't know. I wish there was something I could say. I'm just so sorry you're going through this.
That's
And
perfect.
yeah, like I wish I had something else to offer, but I just want to let you know that, I hear you and I receive that. But I know that it's just easier said than done. And I was going to ask you, I mean, it's hard because I think I want to encourage people to just be careful what they say, but not so much that in all situations of grief. So I
Right.
was going to kind of ask you, what do you want for, like, what would you love for other people to either say, how you would like them to show up without obviously scolding anybody for not doing it
Yeah.
right? Because I don't want to
Yeah, of
encourage
course.
that. Not that you would. I just think that sometimes people are like, oh, I'm just afraid I'm going to do it wrong. And so I'm just going to hang back. But what do you want people, how do you want people to respond? How would you like people to
Yeah.
show up for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I would say what has felt the most um effective in terms of like when people reach out when finding out you've got a stage 4 cancer diagnosis or anything that's, hugely um uh I guess like embedded in grief, right? I would say to think about first what you're prepared to offer. Have a specific offer in
Yeah.
mind. If you can't do anything, if finances are not something that you can offer, that's okay. So what can you offer? Can you offer if you ever need somebody to just listen and vent, here's my phone number. Text me. If finances are something that you can offer, people who have reached out and said, "Hey, I don't really know what to say or do, but can I buy you a Grubhub dinner someday?" I had a friend just offer that. Now that's really hard for me to say like, "Yes, can you
Yeah,
order us blah blah,"
I know.
like
I would
that's
have,
hard for me, but the specificity is super helpful because what you don't want to do is put it on the grieving
Yeah.
person to decide what you want from that person. Does that make sense?
Yes, because a lot of people will say, "Let me know if there's anything I can
Yes.
do."
Let me know if there's anything to do. What can I do for you? Don't put it on the grieving person or the sick person to tell you what they need. Although there are some people who may very well be able to do that. Say, I need XYZ. But for somebody like me, my preference is like just reach out with the offer, whatever it is you can offer. If it's dinner gift certificates or something, if it's just I had people reach out and say like, "Hey, what's your address? I just want to send you a surprise." That's lovely. I was happy to give my address to people, and I had like boxes that were unmarked. I had no idea who sent me these, but I was like, "Oh, well, these people had asked for my address, so it's probably one of these people, right?" And they just sent some people sent random things, some people sent things that were related to chemotherapy treatment that might help, and those things were all super helpful. So, yeah, I would say the specificity of the offer is super, super helpful for the grieving or sick person. Another person was like, "Can I put a meal train together for you? I'll start this website." And granted, I didn't know what to do with that. I was like, I don't know how this works. So I did not, I failed on that with this person, but it was still a specific offer. I know how to start a meal train. I'm going to start the meal train website and send it to you. And you tell us, like, give us the dates here. Anything specific. That's really it. And even if the specificity comes down to like, I don't have money, I'm not a cook, I'm not near you, I can't walk your dog for you, whatever, but I'm a really good listener. So here's my phone number. Even that is super
Yeah,
helpful.
that's great. I know. I'm sure when I was younger, I didn't show up for people like I didn't even occur to me when I was like a teenager or in college to do things like that.
Yeah,
And now it's my first instinct to do that. And just to even text the person and say, I know like, I've reached out to people and become closer with people because of the things that have happened to them. A
absolutely.
friend lost a child, and I hadn't talked to him in years, and we weren't particularly close, but I always really loved him. And so I just sometimes check in to let him know, hey, your child isn't forgotten. Your baby's not forgotten. I'm thinking of you. And just to let him know that it's not I think sometimes people think, "Oh, well, that's over now." It's like, that happened a while ago, and now it's over, and
Hmm.
it's always an ongoing process. And even, like, let's say in a year you're cancer-free and you're back, you're back and you're bounced back. It's still a traumatic experience, and I'm not saying that you wanna hear about it
Hmm.
for the rest of your life, but just to have people say, "Hey, I know, how are you doing? Like, how's the process going?"
Right. But it
Um,
will be something that once you have a cancer diagnosis, even to stage one, I don't think that it ever really goes away in terms of
right.
like it's always in the back of your mind. That's what every single cancer patient that I've met and talked to now has said that it's just even, a friend of mine, who's an older friend, and she had a diagnosis, I think she was in her 40s and now she's in her 60s. So that's been over 20 years for her, which is fantastic. But even she says, it never really goes away. Even with every year that you add on that year, no evidence of disease, it's the possibility is always there in the back of your mind because they're just cells. They're cells. So you have your whole body is cells. It's like trillions and trillions of cells. And so you think like, gosh, any one of them could just go wrong in an instant. And then there you go. You've got a different type of cancer or it's returned or whatever. So yeah, it's good to say to people that, even if you're just thinking of them, you're just thinking of them and that you haven't forgotten what they've gone through and that, people who've reached out and said, you've inspired me to get a checkup, to get my annual pap smear earlier or whatever. Yes, thank you. Another friend was like, I'm going to push for a scan because I've had an ongoing problem, downstairs,
Yeah.
and I think they found that it was nothing, but thank goodness. Like it's just because those things can go from being nothing to being something very quickly.
Absolutely. What are your hardest days like?
Mm, yeah. Um, my hardest days are honestly feeling numb, because I have felt so much pain now and I've cried so much. My hardest days are when I feel completely unmotivated to do anything than just sit or lay in bed. And that's really sad because when you're faced with a diagnosis like this, it's just a pure reminder that all we have is every day. And that, this life, this is the one time I get to live as this person. I don't know what happens after this, but I know that this little person only gets this one life. And so I want to make the most of every day for this person, for this person's life. But on those days when I feel like I can't do anything or I don't want to do anything, that's really hard. I feel like I'm wasting a gift of a day.
Yeah. And then what are things that help you through? Obviously, in those days, you have to listen to yourself. You can't
Yeah,
push, you can't force yourself into toxic positivity. You can't even
absolutely.
force yourself to go out in nature. It's not that kind of thing. I mean, just, but what are things that have helped along the way to get you through maybe not those moments, but just overall, generally, what are the things that help the most?
Yeah. I would say my animals help a lot. Animal love is such a gift. The fact that if you can have an animal in your life, any animal, do it. I don't care if it's a hamster. Like
You have a parrot.
I have a parrot and I have a dog. We have a dog. The dog loves my partner. I mean, the dog. I had a sense. Um, so in in our little family, I'm the dog finder. I found our first dog who we had for 16 years, or she lived to be 16. We had her for 15. And she passed away from a very insidious cancer that we fought for her for 6 years. So from the time that she was 10, she was diagnosed with this cancer, and we went through 18 rounds of radiation with her. And anyway, she bounced back and then succumbed again. And then we had another surgery and she bounced back again. But ultimately, with her age, she was 16. And it was not the right decision to fight this anymore. So, but I found her originally. I found her. She was she was in the Burbank, California dog shelter. And she was one of the first dogs like in the rows. And I just remember seeing her little face and thinking like, this is before we even adopted her. I was like, oh, I'm gonna love this dog so much it's gonna hurt. And boy, was that true. But she was the one that we picked. And she broke our hearts in the best way possible. And then in December 2022, it was like timing out right with my partner's job for he wasn't quite ready, but it was timing out in such a way where he was going to have some time off. And so it was like, if we're going to have another dog, we should find them now. So I was like on a mission and I went to a shelter near us out in the San Fernando Valley. And I kind of repeated the same process looking at dogs. And we went back to this same shelter a few times. And then I snuck back on my own one time. And I got in a little bit of trouble for doing that, but I just had this sense of like, there's this dog, there's a dog here. I know it. There's a dog here. And sure enough, I walked past this kennel, and in the very back was a dog that was hiding. And in the front of the kennel was another dog that was jumping up and crazy. And I was like, honey, honey, I love you. I love you. But I think I'm here for this shy, scared dog in the back, the one that people are not going to be looking for, the one that's not going to get everyone's attention like you are.
Yeah.
And That dog, it turned out the staff at this shelter were scared of. I was like, "My goodness." But this dog, like, jumped up on me and was, like, kissing me, and I took video and I sent it to my partner, and I was like, "You gotta come meet this boy." He came and met him, we came together, and he was like, "I think we're taking him home." And sure enough, boy, that dog picked him through and through, and I thought and I just I it was confirmed. I was like, I had this feeling that I was finding this dog for my partner. And for me too, but it was just the sense of, like, this is gonna be, like, his dog, you
Yeah.
know? And truly, oh man, this dog loves him so much, and I adore him too. So that was a very long way of saying, if you can adopt an animal,
Mhm.
do it, because they will just bring you so much joy, and the cuddles are just it really is therapeutic to just sit there and cuddle and pet your dog or your cat, or your parrot. So, yes, I have a parrot. I've had him all 26 years of his life. We've gone through many ups and downs together. I just feel like in this life, I'm being taught over and over the power of resilience and change and doing things a new way to improve your life. Um, because despite the diagnosis, I'm so much better now than I was last year. Like, I think about, the trauma of spending 9 days in the hospital with this second surgery. Oh my goodness. I kept saying to everyone, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. I really wouldn't. This is the most horrendous experience I've ever been through. Walking around the hospital on day 4 was the first time I got up from the bed and walked around, and I was so filled with fluid, I could hear my body going squish, squish, squish on the floor. It was awful, but going through that, I had to go through that to get through this other side and to be better and to be changed now. I look at that with my parrot that I've been through 26 years of life with, and it's not easy to have he's like as smart as a toddler. For his whole life, he'll be, as smart as like a 4 or 5-year-old. So he's got very, very specific wants and needs, and I had to learn how to adapt and change things for his needs. And now I'm rewarded with this very sweet, loving parrot, where um we have a beautiful nighttime routine where we sit and I scratch his head, and his feathers are so soft and he's so sweet and he lets me give him kisses, and all of that is so therapeutic.
And your
So
parrot's never gonna say anything offensive. Well, it might, but the parrot's never gonna say anything wrong.
they love you for who you are.
They
And
live
to be
yeah,
honest, I was really scared that there's actually a known thing with parrots and even the littler, like, parakeets, that any kind of, like, physical changes with their humans, they notice and they get upset
yeah.
by. Changes in fingernails, colors, like, changes in haircuts or hair colors. So I was nervous that, I'm wearing this scarf on my head, which I put up in a pretty princess tiara style to make me feel fancy. But I was nervous losing my hair and wearing these things around him, that he might be scared, he might be mad at me, and he's rolled with the punches too, and he sees me no differently, and so, that's just a testament to animals as well, that, like, hey, they don't care. They don't care
Right.
what you look like. They don't care what you're going through. They just care that you're still here for them, and
Yeah.
they'll be there for you.
Yeah, and what are you excited about, or what are you hopeful about for the future?
I am hopeful for the future of I I I told my doctors this, that I feel like I've gained 10 years of my life back. That I feel now like I am in my late 20s or early 30s again. It's incredible. So I am hopeful for having all my body back, and thinking about going back to dance and ballet, which is something I hadn't considered in the last few years, thinking that, oh, my body is aging. It's so awful now. I can't do these things I used to do. My knees hurt so bad. My knees don't hurt anymore. Like, I can do dance moves that I wouldn't have considered doing in, like, the last few years. So, I'm just really hopeful and excited about having my body back.
I love that, and I think it's also a good reminder when you're confronted with mortality that and I even have this just being middle-aged now, where I realize
Mhm.
I quit dance in 8th grade because I started too late, and I'll
Mm,
never all the kids that I took dance with were 3 and 4, and I was in 8th grade, and I was like, "I'm not doing this." Well, now I'm planning to take an adult dance class just because
yes.
I want to, not because
Good.
I'm trying to be, a backup dancer or anything of
Yes.
that nature. It's like, say yes to the things that you've put
Say
off.
yes.
Say yes to the things that you've always wanted to do but never tried. We always think, "Oh, we'll do it later. We'll do it later." Well, I lived in Paris in the '90s, and I was going to see Nirvana. I was gonna get tickets for Nirvana, but then the line was too long, and I was like, "Ugh, I'll catch him when I get back home."
Oh,
And
no.
that was right when Kurt passed. So there are things that, I think that even just sort of being faced with these things, even just being older, like, "Hey, I don't have I might have 50 years left, I might have 10, no one knows
No
for
one
any of us,
knows. Yeah.
regardless of cancer or anything else, no
Yeah.
one knows. Anything can happen, and so it is also a call to don't put off those things, and as it's a cliche, but tell the people in your life that you love them, show up the best way you can, and be present in the moment, and really not to take anything for granted. Sometimes life sucks.
Yes.
It does, and that's okay. It's okay to feel that way, but also enjoy these small moments because you don't know when again, you don't know when your last breath may be.
Yep.
So
You
I
don't
love
know.
that. Yeah.
Mhm. You don't know.
Jenna, thank you so much. I'm gonna have links to again your GoFundMe, also whatever you can share your music wise. Do you still have a website up for
Oh,
you?
yeah, I have all the things. Yeah, I
I'll
still
put
have the website is great. It's jennabryson.com, and that's
Perfect. I'll put that
yes.
down below and your
Perfect.
Instagram and everything. So I just thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing your story. And I'm excited for you too, because I do feel hopeful for you.
Mhm.
And I look forward to seeing what else you do and what else you share. And just know that you are making such a big difference by talking about this
Yes.
and being an advocate for health and helping people navigate the healthcare system, which is a beast.
It
So, is there
is.
anything else that you would like to say in terms of what you just want people to know?
Yeah. Um, yeah. I I guess I just wanna leave people with, stressing on the fact that your body does change. It absolutely does change, but there are some changes that are not normal and that you do wanna pay attention to. And as hard and scary as it is going through the healthcare system, you've gotta try. You've got if you have to kick, fight, and scream, do it. Do it because I've heard so many stories now of people who it was only after they kick fought and screamed their heads off that they got the tests that they needed that gave them the diagnosis that they, as terrifying as it was, they needed to know so that they could heal. If I hadn't finally paid attention to these things and my body literally shut me down, right? It was like, you don't get to walk anymore. This pain is so bad, you're not going to walk anymore. Do not ignore those things. Go scream, shout at anybody who will listen until you get the test that you need to find out what is going on and what is wrong so that you can get through it and get healthy again.
After we stopped rolling, Jenna had one more thought that she wanted to share. So I'm handing the mic over to Jenna now.
Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, it just popped into my mind when Shannon was asking about, what gets you through your days. What's the thing that gives you hope and makes you excited through a stage 4 cancer diagnosis? And I was kicking myself that I didn't remember this phrase that helps me every day. If I remember this phrase, that this is happening for me, it's not happening to me. And I know that there's a lot of things that do happen to us in life. There's things that happen to us like a car accident or, you don't get the house that you put your bid on or whatever, or somebody cuts in front of you in line. I don't know. From the big things to the small things. Yes, things happen to us, but if you can look at things from a different point of view, that maybe this is happening for me, not happening to me, that it's empowering. It's empowering to be able to say, this surgery, this diagnosis, and all these people who are here to help me are happening for me, not happening to me. And that has been hugely transformational, um, because now I'm reaping the benefits of having lived with this cancer inside of me for who knows how long. It could have been a decade. I don't know. I'll never know. But now it's out of me, and I'm getting the treatment to make sure that it's out of me. And that's all happening for me for my greatest good. So I just wanted to add that, and hope that maybe there's people out there who, I'm sure you've heard this phrase before, but it's really true. If you can try to find the point of view, this is happening for you, not happening to you, you will find the silver linings.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks, Shannon.